Wildcard Wednesday. Welcome back to another episode of That Stupid Podcast. I know RJ's not here today, but I'm Rev, and I'm here to talk about WWDC. It is Apple Wildcard Wednesday yet again. I know it was Apple Wildcard Wednesday a couple weeks ago, but there's a lot to talk about. The keynote was just a couple of days ago, and if you missed the WWDC keynote, I'm going to break down some of the announcements that were made about both Mac OS X 10.10, which is like Mac 10.10.10, as well as iOS 8 that was recently announced. Now, no hardware was announced at WWDC. I was kind of hoping that we might see a 4K display there, but, you know, that stuff will come a little bit later this year. It is not a surprise we didn't see the iPhone 6 or potentially the next generation of iPad, but it was nice to see iOS 8, and it was very nice to see Mac OS 10.10. Now, I want to start with Yosemite, which is the upgrade for Mac OS X. That's the upgrade from Mavericks, which is the current version. Yosemite, just like Mavericks, is going to be free, so they're not going to change that model. In fact, we talked earlier, Microsoft is looking at going to that model. That's still a rumor, but it's a great model to have. Now, for me, 10.10 or Yosemite is what Mavericks really should have been. I've got a list of features that I want to kind of talk about and go over, and what they mean to you, what they mean to me, and what they mean to the average Netflix viewer. Netflix viewer. Well, for those of you who have Macs like me, I've got my trusty 2011 MacBook Pro here. I mean, it's hard to believe this laptop's 3 years old, but it still runs really, really well. And I don't use Safari. I've never used Safari. I hate Safari. I might start using Safari. I'm pretty much a religious Chrome guy, mostly because Firefox has a lot of memory leaks, and it's a massive battery hog. Now, Safari has always done better on battery than Chrome or Firefox, but when Tim Cook showed some of the graphs during the WWDC keynote, the performance not only was better in Safari for watching Netflix because they're bringing HTML5 viewing, because Silverlight's on its way out, but more importantly, the battery performance was tenfold better than, say, Firefox, and more than twice as good as Chrome. So that's a reason to binge Netflix on OS X 10.10 with Yosemite and Safari. So HTML5 for Netflix, that's a big deal. A couple things that you'll notice immediately when you see 10.10, and if you want to see 10.10, probably around July. It's usually when they announce their summer beta program. You'll be able to get a copy of the beta. It won't be available for the public for release until later in the fall. Probably, I'm going to make a guess, October, but we'll see when that actually pans out to be. But you can sign up for the beta program. I would recommend, however, you don't do that on your main. If you only have one Mac, don't do that on the only Mac you own. If you own a couple of Macs, or if you run like parallels like I do on this Mac, upgrade your parallels, your VM Mac, if you will, and get to play with it. But the first thing you'll notice, it looks a little iOS-ish. Only a little. It is a little bit flatter. Some of the icons do look a little bit nicer. They look a little bit flatter. They've added some translucency. They've also paid attention to screen real estate. In Safari, for example, they've collapsed the menu bar. Now, that's a big deal because the menu bar being collapsed and having that in search and everything else gives you just a few more pixels of space, and that may not seem like a big deal, but it is. They're also paying attention to things that photographers like. For those of you like me who use Lightroom as an example, I love Lightroom by Adobe. I subscribe to Adobe Creative Cloud because it's cheaper in the long run for me to do that than buy upgrade. But the thing I love about Lightroom is it has it's a dark moded application. So you don't have these bright white menus and icons and things that are kind of glaring back at your face. Now, granted, laptop screen is not the best thing to do photo editing on. That's why I use a much higher resolution screen when I do my photo editing. But OS X 10.10 has a dark mode. It actually has a slate gray, kind of midnight black menu system, so you can immediately flip that over. You've seen this in iOS 7 because the new keyboard, depending upon the application that you're in, will go into this dark mode. And so, well, now your menu system in OS X 10.10. So that's kind of a big deal. Another big deal about OS 10.10 is SMS relay. So, for those of you who have really bought into the Mac and Apple ecosystem, like you have an iPad, an iPhone, a MacBook, maybe an iMac, you'll notice that when you get an iMessage from someone, you get it on all of your devices. But if you get an SMS message from someone, say on an Android phone, or even someone on another iPhone that maybe just disabled iMessages because they don't like it, you don't get that on every device. You only get that on your cell phone. That's changing. OS X 10.10, and while I'll talk about iOS 8 more a little bit later, are going to support SMS relaying. And that means that every message you get on your phone is going to relay that information via iMessages to your Mac. Now that's a big deal. It also means that the Mac is going to support VoIP calling from your phone. So if you have an iOS 8 device on your, like an iPhone 5 or 5S, or generally the iPhone 6 or whatever they're going to call it later this year, and you get a phone call, and let's say your phone is in the living room and your Mac is in your office, you work from home, you're going to have a little notification that someone's calling you on your Mac. It'll come up right here in the notification center, and if you choose to answer it on the Mac, you'll be able to do that without walking out to the phone in the living room. Now, where this is very interesting, and for those of you who think, well, doesn't Google Voice do this? Because Google Voice does do this. Skype does it too. When someone calls you on Skype, it rings on every phone. Lync does that. If you have Microsoft Lync for the enterprise, rings on every device. What's interesting about this, though, is because it's only relaying the VoIP from the phone, right? It's pushing the call to VoIP from the phone. It'll stop ringing on the phone. The big thing about Google Voice that annoys the crap out of me, and Skype too actually, is when I finally answer, let's say my iPhone to pick up a Google Voice call, my laptop's still ringing, my desktop's still ringing, my iPad's still ringing. And anywhere I have Google Voice or Skype or whatever it was that I answered, it's still ringing for like another minute sometimes. It's very, very annoying. So I'm hoping that Apple is able to deliver on kind of the unannoyance factor, if you will. Some other big changes to OS 10.10. Auto configurations for hotspots. Now, this is partly an iOS 8 feature as well, but if you have an Apple iPhone and you have a Mac and they're both signed in with the same, basically, I think, iTunes account, they're on the same whatever, and you're out somewhere where I got no Wi-Fi, but I have my phone, it'll automatically configure. Now, you can do this now. I can turn hotspot tethering on the iPhone. I can advertise it, but without even doing that, we'll be able to immediately support an auto configuration of that tethering to your Apple, iMac or MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, whatever you got, without the need for configuration, password entry, anything. It'll just automatically configure that because you don't have Wi-Fi. It's like, hey, I'm a laptop. I need on the internet. It will go find your phone and right down to the network. So that's kind of cool. Other features, and I'm not going to go through all of them because I just don't have that kind of time, but that really caught my attention, universal search. Now, Spotlight, which if you don't know what that is, that's the little magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner of your Mac bar, and that's where most of you go and type in the application name, because I don't like, and I don't do it on Windows either. I rarely use icons anymore. On my Windows boxes, like this little guy here, or my Mac machines, like this little guy here, I just go to the search and I type in the name of the app that I want, or the file name that I want to open if it's Word. If I'm going to update my resume, I just type in that and, I hit enter and it opens the program and the file and whatever. And Spotlight's been pretty good, but now when you click Spotlight, it opens up in the middle of your page, which is interesting. I'm not sure if I like that or dislike it, but the big thing I do like is it's a universal search. Now, this came to Windows a few years ago when Windows 7 really started pushing universal search, which means it doesn't just search your programs, it doesn't just search your files, it doesn't just search your iCloud. For the Windows side, that would be like the Windows Live Drive, OneDrive now, it's called, right? It doesn't search those things. It also searches Bing. It'll use the internet to go out and do internet searches. So just like when you ask Siri something on your phone today, she'll go out and she'll check on, Wikipedia, or she'll look on the internet for stuff. Well, you'll get that same universal search inside your Mac OS X 10.10, which is really, really handy. Was really kind of interested to see that. So Hopefully they'll do a good job with universal search. I know it was interesting because when Microsoft announced that they started universal search, people went kind of nuts and they didn't like the idea. I think people are used to that now, and I don't think it's as big of a problem as it used to be for people freaking out about I don't want my laptop searching the internet for everything. I don't know why I said it that way, but it's pretty nice. So the next and the last thing about 10.10 specifically, and really this isn't 10.10. This covers both the iPhone or the iOS ecosphere as well as the Mac ecosphere, and that's big changes to iCloud. Now, Apple has done a pretty terrible job at their cloud services, right? And they've over the last year or year and a half have started building data center after data center to help boost their cloud services. Well, they've really got an aggressive plan to boost cloud services. So for those of you who use anything other than iWork, right, which is their pages, numbers, right, apps, it doesn't work very well. When you have application document synchronization between, say, your iPad, your Mac, and your iPhone, other than iWork, these third-party applications that tend to try and use those cloud sync, they just don't seem to work very well. So there's some changes to iCloud to help make that better. Actually, some big changes to iCloud. One is with the Mail application that's built into the Mac. It will support, if you use iCloud storage, when you send someone a document, up to 5 gigabytes, in fact, it doesn't send them the document or the file or the video or whatever it was you were sending them. It uploads it to the cloud, and if they're on a Mac using iMail, they'll get it embedded in the email. If they're not using Mac or not using iMail at least, like maybe they're using Microsoft Outlook or the built-in mail client for I don't know if it's still Thunderbird for Firefox, whatever. Or if they're on Hotmail or whatever, they'll get a link and they can go securely download that from an SSL-based connection to see whatever that document was. So it's really nice. It doesn't clog your email box up. It doesn't clog their email box up. And in some cases, because the limit that the iCloud storage is 5 gigs, you couldn't send that big of a file to someone in email anyway. So where that's interesting is that's a direct competition really to the way the Google Drive works. Because in Gmail, you can do stuff like that now. Well, you're going to be able to do it in iCloud. And the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter whose email service you use. Because iMail isn't an email service. So yes, you could use iCloud's mail service, although I don't know anyone who does, but you can also use someone else's mail service for this to work. And that's really kind of neat. The next big thing about iCloud that's changed is photo sync is really changed. Windows is getting included in this, which is nice because the iCloud does have some Windows features as well. But right now, PhotoStream only syncs about the last 1,000 photos you've taken. Now, if you take a lot of photos, that means that it's constantly just falling off the end. And they're not high resolution. They're a subpar resolution. Granted, they're on all your devices, but they're not that great. The new photo stream options or photo album streaming options for the new version of iCloud that's coming will let you not have a limit on the number, so it's not 1,000 anymore. It's really based on how much iCloud storage space you have, which I'll get to in just a second. But it does the same default high resolution both on photos and on videos, and you don't have to have them locally on your other devices. They don't stream to those devices and then download. They only stream when you need to open them. So they're real-time live stream, so to speak, from the cloud. So if you edit one of them in iPhoto, which, by the way, for the Mac is going away with just photos to match the iOS version of that same app, which is amazing, some of the changes they've done to that as well, that edit happens instantaneously-ish. I mean, with cloud, it's not 100% to the millisecond, but it's within a second, probably, that when you update it here, it's updated on your phone, it's updated on your iPad, it's updated everywhere, because the file itself only existed in one place, on the cloud. Now, the last big thing about iCloud, and I said I'd get to the storage in just a second, right now, as it sits, you're kind of limited to the amount of iCloud storage, up to 55 gigs, right? The first 5 gigs free. You can buy 20 gigs, or you can buy 50 gigs. You pay per year. You get a little bit of storage, a little bit extra, which is good for backing up your iPhone, backing up your iPad, or doing that document synchronization if you need it. But because of all the changes they're making to iCloud, not just with the photo sync, but they're opening up a little broader with the document synchronization between third-party applications, so they're hoping and banking people will use it more. They're doing tiers all the way up to 1 terabyte of iCloud storage. The first 5 gig, still going to be free, so that's not going to change. But the 200 gig plan is $399 a month. That is in direct competition price-wise with things like SkyDrive, or OneDrive now, I should say, and Google Drive. And it's going to be in direct competition with people like Dropbox. So it's going to be really interesting to see, because $4 a month for 200, not 20, 200 gigs of space is pretty significant. In fact, for most people, I would say 80%, I'm just going to throw a number out there, I would say that's probably more than enough. I'll jump on that plan. I know I will. I have terabytes and terabytes of stuff I download for enterprise purposes, but for my Mac ecosphere and all the documents I have there and all the photos I have that synchronize between our devices, why not? I mean, it's $4 a month for a lot of space. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think we might even see that a little bit before the launch of iOS 8, those iCloud changes, because a lot of that stuff is already kind of live in the background. So it'll be interesting to see when they launch that specifically. It may not happen until iOS 8 and Mac OS X 10.10, but we'll see. The next big change before we get completely into iOS, but this is starting to get that direction, is one very interesting change to iTunes that they talked about very briefly in the keynote. And that is, we all do it, and Apple knows that we all do it, and they know why we do it. We share an iTunes account typically, if you're a family of 2 or 3 or 4, and you do it because if you buy a song once, you want other people to be able to listen to it, or if you buy an application, you want to be able to download it on your devices and whatnot. But the big change they made to iTunes was now that for the first time, you're going to be able to do a family sharing iTunes account. You're going to be able to share that library of stuff that you bought, right, with up to 6 people. So no more will you have to, every time someone downloads an application on their iPad, if you have auto download turned on, for example, with the music or the apps, does it automatically download on yours? Or if you're not a big fan of country music and your significant other is a huge fan of country music and you share an iTunes account and they're constantly buying, Trace Adkins and Tim McGraw albums, and you just keep seeing the stuff in your playlist, and it just annoys you. But you like rap, and your significant other is not a real big fan of 50 Cent. Well, that's fine now, because you're going to have your list of music in your iTunes store. They're going to have their list of music in their iTunes store. And here's the kicker. If you have kids, they can use their own account. Now, it's tied to your credit card, but when they go to download an app that costs money, guess what happens? Actually, I think a download an app in general. I don't think it matters even if it costs money. You can set it. It will pop up, and on your iPhone or your iPad or both, you'll get a message that little Johnny wants to download Plants vs. Zombies 2. And you can say, not now, or no, or yeah, go ahead, or whatever. So very interesting. It's a great way to help kind of manage that part of it as well. And just like the music, you don't have all these kid applications that get kind of clogging in your recommended for you thing, right? Because you're not into maybe Plants vs. Or maybe you are. I love Plants vs. Zombies, just saying. But just an example, right? So that's a big deal. 6 people sharing one iTunes family account. And I think a lot of that, especially with the music side of that, I think that's a little bit of it's a little bit of Beats kind of coming in with the licensing for Beats. It'll be I'm just throwing that out there, I'm just thinking out loud. And speaking of Beats, they weren't on stage. Now there was a phone call between Tim Cook and Dr. Dre, or no, it wasn't Tim, was it? I think it was one of the other guys. But anyway, he called him Doctor at one point, and I swear I started laughing. It was just too funny. But moving away from the Mac to specifically iOS 8, things that you're going to use on your iPad, unless you have an iPad 1, obviously. But they are going to still support iPad 2, which is great, and that's a strong iPad. And the reason, by the way, if you're wondering why are they still supporting iPad 2, for those people out there who have a first generation iPad mini, that's an iPad 2, smaller screen. It's the same A5 processor. It's exactly the same set of specs. So you can't support, if you're not going to support the iPad 2, that means you're not going to support the first generation iPad mini, and that's a pretty new device, considering. I mean, granted, it's 3 years old now, but those are expensive. I mean, I have an iPad mini 2nd generation, came out last year. I know the new ones are coming out this year. The big rumor is it's going to have Touch ID on it, which is great. But I'm not going to buy another one. I mean, I bought a 120 gig iPad mini with Wi-Fi and LTE. The thing costs a truckload of money. I can't just buy one of those every year, right? So for people like us who don't buy an iPad every single year, it's nice to know that they're going to do that. However, if you have an iPhone 4, not the 4S, you're still okay with the 4S, but if you just have an iPhone 4, no iOS 8 for you. That's officially been dropped. That's the A4 processor, I believe, on the if I'm not mistaken. I think the 4S is the first A5. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So no iOS 4 or iPhone 4 below for iOS 8. So let's talk about some things that I liked about iOS 8 right out of the gate. Just big things out of the gate. First, things that we already kind of knew about from the rumor mill. HealthKit and HomeKit. While we didn't necessarily know that's what they were going to be called, we were kind of aware of them if we've been reading some of the rumor mill. So what HealthKit is, and it was a little bit of a twist on what I thought it was, and instead of its own application, HealthKit is a set of APIs, essentially. There is an app called Health, but the idea is your other applications. So if you have a wireless blood pressure monitor, and they make them that work with an app for iOS, for example, that application can now talk directly to HealthKit and kind of create a vault of your health information. Microsoft did sort of a similar thing, although it doesn't automatically talk to devices. It does, however, talk to web services like, and I don't know, I think CVS and Cigna and these other web services. But they have the Microsoft Health Vault, which kind of does this already. Dossier, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, I apologize, is a web version of something similar to this. It, again, talks to web services and tries to automatically catalog things like your diagnoses that have come in from doctors, and it's actually based on connections to your healthcare provider as well as your health insurance care provider, and it kind of reads and scans. I mean, you have to authorize those things, and the idea is it collects all that together, and that's kind of what HealthKit's going to do a little bit too, but it's going to do it from the application level, which is very interesting. HomeKit is the same kind of thing, but for your house. So Apple doesn't necessarily want to make home automation stuff. They know it's already out there. Schlage, I have a Schlage front door lock, for example. Quickset, I think, makes one too with the push buttons and stuff. You've got Genie and Craftsman, who are kind of the same thing for garage door openers, right? They open up. They have now these home link things where you can open your garage door from an app in your phone, whatever. Well, what's interesting about HomeKit is you're going to get some Siri integration potentially, right? But you're going to get integration for all these different applications. So let's say a Philips Hue lights and a garage door. So you can use HomeKit to link those things together. Now, we do this today with something called Z-Wave, where we can create scenes. So if my garage door opens from the garage door opener in my car, then the outside lights turn on automatically, even though those two systems aren't linked together. They're both on Z-Wave, or they have Z-Wave transmitting switches or something, right? And there's a central link somewhere that pushes to the internet, has this little scenes like, oh, the garage door open. Well, let's turn the inside lights on in the garage. Let's turn the outside lights on in the house. Let's turn the hallway lights on inside. All right, it'll do all that at the same time. Well, I think that's kind of where we're going with this Apple product. Now, the interesting thing is for the consumer, it's really going to be good because I would hazard a guess that this is not going to cost the consumer any monthly fees. Most of the Z-Wave style processes, which, by the way, I'm assuming that most of the products are already going to be, because they listed a ton of manufacturers already that are going to be supporting this HomeKit. I think you're not going to have to pay like a monthly fee. And some of these are $15, $20 a month to be able to link all these different things together. Plus, they all have to be on the same standard. Well, now they don't have to be on the same standard. They don't have to use the same Wi-Fi signal. They don't have to use the same whatever. They just have to support HomeKit. And then HomeKit will do all the linking together. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to that. Not to mention, it'd be kind of cool if while I'm driving, because one of the other things about Siri that's been changed is it's gone hands-free in iOS 8. So like you can say, okay, Google, which okay, Google sounds a little weird. You just say, hey, Siri, and she starts listening. So while I'm driving down the street, getting closer and closer to my house, I can say, hey, Siri, open the door and turn the lights on. And the garage door opens, and the lights turn on, and yeah, I mean, come on. We're working in the Star Trek age. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Other changes to iOS on the bottom end, things that you may not as a consumer care about much, but as a developer you might. METAL, metal. Programming or developing to the metal. What they've and I'm not going to explain all of it because, quite frankly, I'm not a developer, and some of the concepts may be a little foreign to me. But I'm going to do my best to tell you what it means for you as a non-developer and what it means for you as a developer. As a non-developer, very easily, it means that on your current generation hardware, because they were using an iPad, what looked like an iPad 4, it was current generation because they said it was an A7. That's what's in the iPad 4 as well as the second generation iPad Mini. That means current generation hardware was running the first person shooter of Plants vs. Zombies, which has a lot of 3D elements in it. But they were also running some other tests. They had fish in water, they had trees blowing blossoms off, which doesn't sound like much unless you see it. And if you haven't seen it, go out and watch the keynote just for this demo. It is amazing. The quality of the 3D is incredible. And because they're not using OpenGL, which is well far above the GPU, they're actually programming at a much lower level. They're talking directly to that. And you might think, well, how can they do that? It's because for the first time, Apple has really opened up the device. And I mean really opened up the device. There are things that they're doing to iOS 8 that I can guarantee you, if Steve Jobs were still around, he would not allow to happen. But they are, for the consumer, all good things. That's the first one. It means that you're going to get to see amazing 3D graphics games on generations that you already own in hardware. That's a big deal. So if you already have an iPad mini like I do, second generation, or an iPad 4, which is the current generation A7 processor, and you're not going to upgrade that device maybe when the iPhone 6 or the iPad 5 or the iPad Air 2 or whatever they're going to call the thing comes out later this year, that's okay. You don't have to, because it's going to look amazing. So while you've got Android devices with these big, nasty Nvidia chips on them, and by the way, they are amazing chips, these new Nvidia chips they're putting in these mobile devices. I'm not going to downplay them because they're awesome. You're going to get nearly that kind of performance out of the same generation hardware you already own because Apple's opening up the APIs directly to the metal. And that's amazing. They're doing that, and they've also changed their programming language. Well, they haven't changed their programming language. It's still based on Objective-C, but they've created something called Swift. Now, Swift is something that I'm not even going to get into, but essentially it's a programming language as a developer that will help you make apps faster, and you're going to have to learn that language if you want to be able to talk to the metal anyway. So, but it didn't look like it was that difficult. If you're a developer, it's just learning some more syntax. But I think it's really good. Now, other things that were opened up. So I mentioned opening up the APIs to the GPU, right? And that's a big deal. But there's much more than that. They have something they're calling Extensibility. They're opening up APIs into the application layers in iOS for things like share cards in ways they've never done before. So let's say you're in the Photos app, for example, and you want to change your photo, and you know that there's this one Instagram filter that you really, really like. You want to use that Instagram filter, but you don't want to go on Instagram. You don't want to post a photo on Instagram. You just want to use a photo. Well, you just want to use a filter. If Instagram wants to support the extensibility for iOS 8, they'll be able to do that. And from within the Photos app, or maybe a different app entirely, if you use something else to manage your photos, you'll be able to do all that Instagram stuff, including post it if you want, or not, depending on how Instagram writes extensibility. You'll be able to do Pinterest right from there. You'll be able to Facebook it right from there, but in ways that you haven't done it before. You'll be able to do that without opening the application. And speaking of Facebook, or even iMessages for that matter, you ever get a notification, you got a message, you drag it down, and there's your text, comes out in the notification center. Well, now you can reply right there as well. You can just go ahead and start typing. You just pull it down a little bit more, type in your reply, and send it without actually opening that app. So if you're already in an application, you don't have to leave it to reply to that text message anymore. That's reason number one. I'm going to make a list of reasons why I may not jailbreak iOS 8. That's the first one. I actually use a program called Byte SMS on my jailbroken iPhone 5.6. I paid $5 for. Totally worth it because it lets me do exactly that. So that's reason number one. Steve may not jailbreak his iPhone after iOS 8. Other things. In fact, let's go straight to reason number 2 and 3 of why I may not jailbreak when I go to iOS 8. Keyboards. Now, a lot of you like Swipe. You've used Swipe. If you're an Android user, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a jailbroken iPhone user, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of people love Swipe. Now, it's not the keyboard of my choice. I use Octopus, which is a different kind of keyboard. It's similar to Swipe, but I like it. Well, iOS 8 is going to, for the very first time, open APIs to support officially, and in fact, he even mentioned Swipe by name on stage, third-party keyboards. So, developers out there, if you'd like to write a keyboard that you want people to try and use for iOS, and you don't want to have to, you know, tell people they got to go jailbreak the thing, and you can sell it in the App Store for 99 cents or even $1.99 maybe if it's a really good keyboard. You're going to be able to do that. And you're going to be able to legitimately sell that in the App Store. You don't have to jailbreak the phone to do it. That's all going to happen in iOS 8. That's a big deal. So that's reason number 2. Jumping right into reason number 3 from reason number 2, widgets. Now, widgets don't seem like a big deal, right? You pull the notification center down, you got all these little widgets. They're built in. You got your Facebook widget and this widget and that widget. But what if the application wanted to create a completely custom widget? A completely custom widget. Well, now they can do that. And when you have an application that you've just recently installed, the one that they showed was ESPN Game Center, I believe, as the demo. If that person wants to write an application with a widget of whatever it might do, maybe it's a widget for your most, a way to interact with a game, or it's a widget to interact with Facebook, because maybe Facebook wants to do a widget that allows you to like, post, and tag from just the notification center. You'll be able to do that. You'll be able to do all of that. So you got customizable-ish widgets, which is really, really very, very cool. Very, very cool. From widgets to back to texting for just a minute. iMessages is, well, in fact, Snapchat even said this. They tweeted, "We'd like to thank Apple for including all of the cool features that Snapchat already has." They were trying to poke a little jab. I think Snapchat in about 2 years is going to be like, man, we should have taken that $3 billion offer from Apple when they were going to buy us. Because, they basically took everything that people like about Snapchat and they threw it right in iMessages. The ability to name your groups. The ability to, and I love this one, do not disturb on individual sets of text message alerts. So if this one group is blown up and you still want to be in the conversation, but you just don't want to hear your text going off every 28 seconds, DND that one, not all, that one group message. You can also choose if you want to leave that group. Very interesting. So a lot of things that are in Snapchat already, and Facebook Messenger actually, for that matter, that you can now do inside of iMessages. So that's another reason you may want to say, hey. The only thing they didn't mention, and this is one thing I do like about by SMS that's not in iMessages yet, and that's the ability to schedule texts. And you might think, why would I want to schedule a text? Because maybe you're lazy and you want to send somebody a text for happy birthday and you don't want to forget. The night before, you say, send this at 8:30 in the morning. And that way, if you're asleep or in the bathroom or driving a car or whatever, that goes out. I've used that before. And now people are going to be like, has he ever actually texted me when I said happy birthday to me? So, sorry. It's true. I do it. The next big API open, the camera. You might think, well, who cares about that? A lot of people care about that. Developers do care about that. There's a lot of APIs for the camera. Both directions, in fact, that are opened up for the very first time. There's neat stuff about the camera that wasn't mentioned in the keynote. Like, you can make a difference between the focal point and the light point inside of a picture when you're about to take it. And that's a big deal, where you have a little bit of delineation there. So that's a kind of neat little thing. And you'll get obviously, as a developer who maybe writes at a camera application, that means that you are going to get the ability to do that too, because you'll just tie into that API. That could really be interesting for Instagram. You'll get your food just the right lighting when you're Instagramming your lunch. The next big thing, if you will, another reason I think I'm up to number 4, I don't know if I lost count, why I may not jailbreak my iPhone after iOS 8. Touch ID. Now, I have an iPhone 5S. I will most likely buy the 5.5-inch version of the iPhone 6 when it ships later this year, or whatever they're going to call it. I know RJ said he won't. He'll wait till the S or whatever, but I think the S is going to be something that you're going to lose. I think that's a name that's going to go away, and I think these iterations, I think the 5.5 version is going to be the premium version. It'll be the upgraded version. We'll see. I might spend money and be like, I wish I hadn't done that, but I'm going to buy the 5.5-inch version. which obviously I already have Touch ID, but now applications. The one he demoed was Mint. I use Mint, by the way, mint.com. It's a really good free service to kind of keep track of your spending, your credit cards, your loans, your debts, whatever, even your portfolio for retirement accounts, stuff like that. Not that I'm advertising for Mint, but if you have Mint on your phone, it has an option, like a lot of programs do, or apps on your phone, where you can password protect that one application. That's really very handy, right? Because maybe you have the My AT&T application and you don't want everybody just looking at your bill, or you have the Mint, or you all log into you have Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whoever your bank might be. You have to log into that as well. Well, what if your bank could, I don't know, store that password as your thumbprint? So when you open Mint or your Bank of America application or your credit union app or whoever that you might have, instead of thumbing out your password, little Touch ID logs you right in. How's that? So Touch ID, that's another API getting built right in. And that's another reason I may not have to jailbreak my iPhone, because there are applications out there specifically designed to help you do that now. But who needs them? Who needs them? If I can tie it, and the very cool thing about it, none of this goes out over the wire. Your thumbprint information's all stored locally in the secure chip on the phone, which means none of that information is sent out to the Ethernet. I said Ethernet because, I don't know, we'll see if anybody catches that. That was what we used before wireless. So that's a big deal. And for developers, it's a big deal. I think the banks are going to jump all over this. And I don't mean just people like Bank of America. I mean everyone who has a credit card based application, PayPal, eBay. I think you're going to see all these applications. Who knows? Facebook might even support that. You log, Facebook's like, hey, would you want to add Touch ID support to your Facebook app? Yeah, yes, please, right? Do you want to add Touch ID support to Simpsons Tapped Out so you don't have to log in every time? Yes, please. So sorry, I love that game. So that's a lot of really kind of big, massive things. Not done yet. There are a couple more. The default mail application. People hate the default. I know you do. I know a lot of you do. But, and in fact, most people, and I use it too, by the way, is Mail, who was actually bought by Dropbox last year, or maybe the year before. I'm trying to remember. Well, the default mail application's kind of mailbox-like, actually. Very mailbox. Very, very Dropbox mailbox. Very much. Swipe to unread, swipe to flag, swipe to archive, swipe to delete, swipe hold. Yeah, so they're taking functionality that has gotten people to leave the default mail application and go to an application like Mailbox, and instead of doing that, stay in the default mail app. Now, while it may not pull people back to the default mailbox or default mail app from people who have switched, new people probably won't switch. And that's the big key. That's the big thing about a lot. That's the iMessages thing. That's the thing with mail. That's the app extensions. It's to keep people from needing to switch. If it's already in the ecosphere, why change? And speaking of why change, I use an app called SoundHound. I love SoundHound. It's been around forever. I even gave them my $2 a few years ago before the app was completely free, because I really, really like the app. It's an app, when I launch it, it automatically starts listening, and when it starts listening, it tells me what song is playing, right? You may know an app that's much more popular than that called Shazam, which, by the way, Shazam does more than songs, right? It does, you can Shazam this TV commercial, you can Shazam da-da-da-da. Well, the rumors about Shazam integration in Siri are true. We didn't think they wouldn't be, but they are true. A couple interesting things about the Shazam part of Siri. And this is why I think SoundHound might be on its way out, because this is pretty cool. Shazam you don't have to go, hey Siri, Shazam this song, right? You just say, hey Siri, she starts listening, you just shut up. Because anytime you activate Siri, whether it's by picking the phone up and holding it to your head, holding the button down until she goes beep beep and starts listening, or saying, hey Siri, whatever activation method you've chosen, as soon as Siri is activated, she's not just listening for your command, she's already listening for the purposes of Shazam. Already. So if there's a music playing, there's a song playing in the background, and you don't ask Siri for something, she'll just tell you what song's playing. And she'll have a little button that you can buy that song if it's in iTunes. All from one place, all built into Siri. Goodbye, SoundHound. I'm very sorry. I will miss you because I'm a huge SoundHound fan. But there's an app I can delete off my phone right now. Well, as soon as iOS 8 comes out. And app space is a commodity, just saying. So that's, it's kind of a big deal. Widgets, Swipe, Shazam, hands-free Siri with OK Siri, as I mentioned, app extensions, the new developing platform Swiss, Metal to get the amazing 3D graphics that we saw during the keynote. Seriously, go back and watch that. iOS 8 is, without a question, in my opinion, the single largest change to iOS since iOS was born. It is what Apple wanted you to think about iOS 7, and really iOS 7 was nothing more than a facelift, if we're being honest. It did have some nice new features, but iOS 8 is massively different. Massively, especially from a development platform side, which means that even if you're not a developer, even if you're just a consumer, all of these open APIs, all of these in-depth things that now developers are going to be able to do with your iDevices, your iPads, your iPhones, and so on, they mean new apps, better applications, amazing integrations, apps that talk to apps without actually talking to apps, because they do everything securely. It's going to be great. So I'm looking forward not to 2014, because iOS 8 doesn't come out probably until October. I'm looking forward to late 2014, but early 2015, because I think you're going to see some amazing applications that are built on just the extensibility and integration between all of these different things that sit inside of the foundation that is iOS 8. Recapping on macOS 10.10, Yosemite. Yosemite is exactly what Mac was supposed to do with Mavericks. It's this big change. It has new widgets and new notification center things and new flat icons and a new mail application and new iCloud changes and SMS relays and VoIP calling and hotspot configurations and on and on. But the big thing, from a foundational standpoint, it is a very different operating system from Mavericks. It is a big change. It's not the biggest change. It's not as big a change as maybe iOS 8 is, although it's pretty close. So Mac, I think, for the first time in a few years, has done well to, first, they do something they've always done, and they do it well. They take what other people have done, and they integrate it into their ecosystem and do it well, and it doesn't break usually, although it does sometimes. They've done that very well, but they've also managed to really innovate again, I think, for the first time in a while, and that's a big deal. And it's not innovation through something new necessarily, in absence of completely new technology, because Touch ID was completely new, right? Granted, fingerprint scanners have been on phones before the iPhone. Not going to say they haven't been, but the way Touch ID works is not how any other, even the S5 from Samsung, the Galaxy, doesn't work like Touch ID. Well, nor does it work nearly as well as Touch ID. So since there's no new Touch ID, although who knows, maybe there is a new piece of hardware other than the size of the screen. We haven't really seen the iPhone 6 yet, not really, so they could have something up their sleeve. But I think in light of that innovation, where they've innovated from not having something new, they've innovated by opening things up and allowing developers really for the first time to get into that phone and just go to town. And I, for one, am looking forward to that. So that's really all we got. And I know it was a lot to sit through. It was just me, no RJ, just me and you having a little talky talk about some Apple. Had to get my fanboy on for just a little bit. But if you come back tomorrow, RJ will be back. He'll be back on Friday as well. And if I'm not mistaken, we have the best of on Friday, and tomorrow